Section 8 of the Arabian Nights Entertainments, Volume 4. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Christopher Walters. The Arabian Nights Entertainments, Volume 4. Translated by Jonathan Scott. Section 8. The Story of Prince Ahmad and the Fairy Pari Bano, Part 5. The next day, when the prince came into his father's presence, who was talking with his favorites, and had sat down by him after a conversation on different subjects, the Sultan, addressing himself to Prince Ahmed, said, "Son, when you came and dispelled those clouds of melancholy which your long absence had brought upon me, you made the place you had chosen for your retreat a mastery. I was satisfied with seeing you again, and knowing that you were content with your condition, sought not to penetrate into your secret, which I found you did not wish I should. I know not what reason you had thus to treat a father, whom ever was and still continues anxious for your happiness. I now know your good fortune. I rejoice with you, and much approve of your conduct in marrying a fairy so worthy of your love, and so rich and powerful as I am informed she is. Powerful as I am, it was not possible for me to have procured for you so great a match. Now you are raised to so high a rank as to be envied by all but a father. I not only desire to preserve the good understanding which has hitherto subsisted between us, but request that you will use your influence with your wife, to obtain her assistance when I may want it. I will therefore make a trial of your interest this day. You are not insensible at what a great expense, not to say trouble, to my generals, officers, and myself, every time I take the field they provide tents, mules, camels, and other beasts of burden to carry them. If you consider the pleasure you would do me, I am persuaded you could easily procure from the fairy a pavilion that might be carried in a man's hand, and which would extend over my whole army, especially when you let her know it is for me. Though it may be a difficult thing to procure, she will not refuse you. All the world knows fairies are capable of executing most extraordinary undertakings." Prince Ahmed never expected that the Sultan his father would have made a demand like this, which appeared to him so difficult, not to say impossible. Though he knew not absolutely how great the power of genii and fairies was, he doubted whether it extended so far as to furnish such a tent as his father desired. Moreover, he had never asked anything of the fairy Pari Bano, but was satisfied with the continual proofs she had given him of her passion, and had neglected nothing to persuade her that his heart perfectly corresponded without any views beyond maintaining himself in her good graces. He was therefore in the greatest embarrassment what answer to make. At last he replied, "If, sir, I have concealed from your majesty what has happened to me, and what course I took after finding my arrow, the reason was that I thought it of no great importance to you to be informed of such circumstances. And though I know not how this mystery has been revealed to you, I cannot deny but your information is correct. I have married the fairy you speak of. I love her, and am persuaded she loves me in return. I can say nothing as to the influence your majesty believes I have over her. It is what I have not yet proved, nor thought of trying, but could wish you would dispense with my making the experiment, and let me enjoy the happiness of loving and being beloved, with all that disinterestedness I had proposed to myself. However, the demand of a father is a command upon every child, who, like me, thinks it is his duty to obey him in everything. And though it is with the greatest reluctance, I will not fail to ask my wife the favor your majesty desires, but cannot promise you to obtain it. And if I should not have the honor to come again to pay you my respects, it will be the sign that I have not been able to succeed in my request. But beforehand, I desire you to forgive me, and consider that you yourself have reduced me to this extremity." "Son," replied the Sultan of the Indies, "I should be sorry that what I ask should oblige you to deprive me of the gratification of seeing you as usual. I find you do not know the power a husband has over a wife, and yours would show that her love to you was very slight if, with the power she possesses as a fairy, she should refuse so trifling a request as that I have begged you to make. Lay aside your fears, which proceed from your believing yourself not to be loved so well as you love her. Go, only ask her. You will find the fairy loves you better than you imagine, and remember that people, for want of requesting, often lose great advantages. Think with yourself, that as you love her, you could refuse her nothing. Therefore, if she loves you, she will not deny your requests." All these representations of the Sultan of the Indies could not satisfy Prince Ahmed, who would rather he had asked anything else than, as he supposed, one must expose him to the hazard of displeasing his beloved Pari Bano. And so great was his vexation that he left the court 2 days sooner than he used to. When he returned, the fairy, to whom he always before had appeared with a gay countenance, asked him the cause of the alteration she perceived in his looks, and finding that instead of answering he inquired after her health to avoid satisfying her, she said to him,
"I will answer your question when you have answered mine."
The prince declined a long time, protesting that nothing was the matter with him. But the more he denied, the more she pressed him, and said,
"I cannot bear to see you thus. Tell me what makes you uneasy, that I may remove the cause, whatever it may be. For it must be very extraordinary if it is out of my power, unless it be the death of the Sultan your father. In that case, time, with all that I will contribute on my part, can alone comfort you."
Prince Ahmed could not long withstand the pressing instances of the fairy. "Madam," said he, "God prolong the Sultan my father's life, and bless him to the end of his days. I left him alive and in perfect health, therefore that is not the cause of the melancholy you perceive in me. The Sultan, however, is the occasion of it, and I am the more concerned because he has imposed upon me the disagreeable necessity of importuning you. You know the care I have at your desire taken to conceal from him the happiness I have enjoyed in living with you, and of having received the pledge of your faith after having pledged my love to you. How he has been informed of it I cannot tell." Here the fairy interrupted Prince Ahmed and said,
"But I know. Remember what I told you of the woman who made you believe she was sick, on whom you took so much compassion. It is she who has acquainted your father with what you have taken so much care to hide from him. I told you that she was no more sick than you or I, and she has made it appear so, for in short, after the 2 women whom I charged to take care of her had given her the water sovereign against all fevers, but which however she had no occasion for, she pretended that it had cured her, and was brought to take her leave of me, that she might go the sooner to give an account of the success of her undertaking. She was in so much haste that she would have gone away without seeing my palace if I had not, by bidding my 2 women show it to her, given her to understand that it was worth her seeing. But proceed and tell me what is the necessity your father has imposed on you to be so importunate, which, be persuaded, however, you can never be to your affectionate wife."
"Madam," pursued Prince Ahmed, "you have observed that hitherto I have been content with your love, and have never asked you any other favor. For what, after the possession of so amiable a wife, can I desire more? I know how great your power is, but I have taken care not to make proof of it to please myself. Consider, then, I conjure you, that it is not myself but the Sultan my father who, indiscreetly, as I think, asks of you a pavilion large enough to shelter him, his court, and army from the violence of the weather when he takes the field, and which a man may carry in his hand. Once more, remember, it is not I, but the Sultan my father who asks this favor."
"Prince,"
replied the fairy, smiling,
"I am so sorry that so trifling a matter should disturb and make you so uneasy as you appear. I see plainly 2 things have contributed towards it. One is the law you have imposed on yourself, to be content with loving me, being loved by me, and deny yourself the liberty of soliciting the least favor that might try my power. The other, I do not doubt, whatever you may say, was that you thought that what your father asked was out of my power. As to the first, I commend you, and shall love you the better, if possible, for it. And for the second, I must tell you that what the Sultan your father requests is a trifle, as upon occasion I can do him more important service. Therefore be easy in your mind, and persuaded that far from thinking myself importuned, I shall always take real pleasure in performing whatever you can desire."
Pari Banu then sent for her treasurer, to whom, when she came, she said,
"Nur Jahan,
which was her name,
bring me the largest pavilion in my treasury."
Nur Jahan returned presently with a pavilion, which could not only be held, but concealed in the palm of the hand, when it was closed, and presented it to her mistress, who gave it Prince Ahmed to look at. When Prince Ahmed saw the pavilion which the fairy called the largest in her treasury, he fancied she had a mind to banter him, and his surprise soon appeared in his countenance, which Pari Banu perceiving, she burst out a-laughing.
"What, Prince,"
cried she,
"do you think I jest with you? You will see that I am in earnest." "Nur Jahan,"
said she to her treasurer,
taking the tent out of Prince Ahmed's hands. "Go and set it up, that he may judge whether the Sultan his father will think it large enough." The treasurer went out immediately with it from the palace, and carried it to such a distance that, when she had set it up, one end reached to the palace. The prince, so far from thinking it small, found it large enough to shelter 2 armies as numerous as that of the Sultan his father, and then said to Pari Bano, "I ask my princess 1,000 pardons for my incredulity. After what I have seen, I believe there is nothing impossible to you." "You see," said the fairy, "that the pavilion is larger than your father may have occasion for, but you are to observe that it has one property that becomes larger or smaller according to the extent of the army it is to cover, without applying any hands to it." The treasurer took down the tent again, reduced it to its first size, brought it and put it into the prince's hands. He took it, and without staying longer than till the next day, mounted his horse, and went with the usual attendance to the Sultan his father. The Sultan, who was persuaded that such a tent as he had asked for was beyond all possibility, was in great surprise at the prince's speedy return. He took the tent, but after he had admired its smallness, his amazement was so great that he could not recover himself when he had set it up in the great plain before mentioned, and found it large enough to shelter an army twice as large as he could bring into the field. Regarding this excess in its dimension as what might be troublesome in the use, Prince Ahmed told him that its size would always be proportionable to his army. To outward appearance, the Sultan expressed great obligation to the prince for so noble a present, desiring him to return his thanks to the fairy, and to show what a value he had set upon it, ordered it to be carefully laid up in his treasury. But within himself he felt greater jealousy than his flatterers and the sorceress had suggested to him, considering that, by the fairy's assistance, the prince his son might perform things infinitely above his own power, notwithstanding his greatness and riches. Therefore, more intent upon his ruin, he went to consult the sorceress again, who advised him to engage the prince to bring him some of the water of the Fountain of Lions. In the evening, when the Sultan was surrounded as usual by all his court, and the prince came to pay his respects among the rest, he addressed himself to him in these words:
"Son, I have already expressed to you how much I am obliged for the present of the tent you have procured me, which I esteem the most valuable curiosity in my treasury. But you must do one thing more, which will be no less agreeable to me. I am informed that the fairy, your spouse, makes use of a certain water, called the water of the Fountain of Lions, which cures all sorts of fevers, even the most dangerous. And as I am perfectly well persuaded my health is dear to you, I do not doubt that you will ask her for a bottle of that water, and bring it to me, as a sovereign remedy, which I may use as I have occasion. Do me this important service, and complete the duty of a good son towards a tender father." Prince Ahmed, who believed that the Sultan his father would have been satisfied with so singular and useful a tent as that which he had brought, and that he would not have imposed any new task upon him which might hazard the fairy's displeasure, was thunderstruck at this new request, notwithstanding the assurance she had given him of granting him whatever lay in her power. After a long silence, he said, "I beg of your majesty to be assured that there is nothing I would not undertake to procure which may contribute to the prolonging of your life, but I could wish it might not be by the means of my wife. For this reason I dare not promise to bring the water. All I can do is to assure you I will request it of her, but it will be with as great reluctance as I asked for the tent." The next morning Prince Ahmed returned to the fairy Pari Bano, and related to her sincerely and faithfully all that had passed at his father's court, from the giving of the tent, which he told her he received with the utmost gratitude, to the new request he had charged him to make. He added, "But, my princess, I only tell you this as a plain account of what passed between me and my father. I leave you to your own pleasure whether you will gratify or reject this his new desire. It shall be as you please." "No, no," replied the fairy. "I am glad that the Sultan of the Indies knows that you are not indifferent to me. I will satisfy him, and whatever advice the sorceress may give him, for I see that he hearkens to her counsel, he shall find no fault with you or me. There is much wickedness in this demand, as you will understand by what I am going to tell you. The Fountain of Lions is situated in the middle of a court of a great castle, the entrance into which is guarded by 4 fierce lions, 2 of which sleep alternately, while the other 2 are awake. But let not that frighten you. I will supply you with the means to pass by them without danger." The fairy Pari Bano was at that time at work with her needle, and as she had by her several clues of thread, she took up one,
and presenting it to Prince Ahmed, said, "First, take this clue of thread. I will tell you presently the use of it. In the second place, you must have 2 horses. One you must ride yourself, and the other you must lead, which must be loaded with a sheep cut into 4 quarters, that must be killed today. In the third place, you must be provided with a bottle, which I will give you, to bring the water in. Set out early tomorrow morning, and when you have passed the iron gate, throw before you the clue of thread, which will roll till it reaches the gates of the castle. Follow it, and when it stops, as the gates will be open, you will see the 4 lions. The 2 that are awake will, by their roaring, wake the other 2. Be not alarmed, but throw each of them a quarter of the sheep, and then clap spurs to your horse, and ride to the fountain. Fill your bottle without alighting, and return with the same expedition. The lions will be so busy eating, they will let you pass unmolested."
Prince Ahmed set out the next morning at the time appointed him by the fairy, and followed her directions punctually. When he arrived at the gates of the castle, he distributed the quarters of the sheep among the 4 lions, and passing through the midst of them with intrepidity, got to the fountain, filled his bottle, and returned safe. When he had got a little distance from the castle gates, he turned about, and perceiving 2 of the lions coming after him, drew his sabre, and prepared himself for defense. But as he went forwards, he saw one of them turn out of the road at some distance, and showed by his head and tail that he did not come to do him any harm, but only to go before him, and that the other stayed behind to follow. He therefore put his sword again into its scabbard. Guarded in this manner, he arrived at the capital of the Indies, but the lions never left him till they had conducted him to the gates of the Sultan's palace, after which they returned the way they had come, though not without alarming the populace, who fled or hid themselves to avoid them, notwithstanding they walked gently, and showed no signs of fierceness. A number of officers came to attend the prince while he dismounted, and conduct him to the Sultan's apartment, who was at that time conversing with his favorites. He approached the throne, laid the bottle at the Sultan's feet, kissed the rich carpet which covered the footstool, and rising, said, "I have brought you, sir, the salutary water which your majesty so much desired to store up among other rarities in your treasury, but at the same time wish you such health as never to have occasion to make use of it." After the prince had concluded his compliment, the Sultan placed him on his right hand, and said, "Son, I am much obliged to you for this valuable present, as also for the great danger you have exposed yourself to on my account, which I have been informed of by the sorceress who knows the Fountain of Lions. But do me the pleasure," continued he, "to inform me by what address, or rather by what incredible power, you have been preserved." "Sir," replied Prince Ahmed, "I have no share in the compliment your majesty is pleased to make me. All the honor is due to the fairy, my spouse, and I take no other merit than that of having followed her advice." Then he informed the Sultan what that advice was, by the relation of his expedition, and how he had conducted himself. When he had done, the Sultan, who showed outwardly all the demonstrations of joy but secretly became more and more jealous, retired into an inward apartment, whence he sent for the sorceress. The sorceress, on her arrival, saved the Sultan the trouble of telling her of the success of Prince Ahmed's journey, which she had heard before she came, and therefore was prepared with a new request. This she communicated to the Sultan, who declared it the next day to the prince in the midst of all his courtiers in these words: "Son, I have one thing yet to ask of you, after which I shall expect nothing more from your obedience, nor your interest with your wife. This request is, to bring me a man not above 1.5 feet high, whose beard is 30 feet long, who carries upon his shoulders a bar of iron of 500 weight, which he uses as a quarterstaff, and who can speak." Prince Ahmed, who did not believe that there was such a man in the world as his father had described, would gladly have excused himself, but the Sultan persisted in his demand, and told him the fairy could do more incredible things. Next day the prince returned to the subterraneous kingdom of Pari Bano, to whom he related his father's new demand, which he said he looked upon to be a thing more impossible than the 2 first. "For," added he, "I cannot imagine that there is or can be such a man in the world. Without doubt he has a mind to try whether I am silly enough to search, or if there is such a man, he seeks my ruin. In short, how can we suppose that I should lay hold of a man so small, armed as he describes? What arms can I use to reduce him to submission? If there are any means, I beg you will tell me how I may come off with honor this time also." "Do not alarm yourself, Prince. replied the fairy.
"You ran a risk in fetching the water of the fountain of the lions for your father, but there is no danger in finding this man. It is my brother Shaibar, who is so far from being like me, though we both had the same father, that he is of so violent a nature that nothing can prevent his giving bloody marks of his resentment for a slight offense. Yet, on the other hand, is so liberal as to oblige anyone in whatever they desire. He is made exactly as the Sultan your father has described him, and has no other arms than a bar of iron of 500 pounds weight, without which he never stirs, and which makes him respected. I will send for him, and you shall judge the truth of what I tell you, but prepare yourself not to be alarmed at his extraordinary figure."
"What? My queen," replied Prince Ahmed, "do you say Shaibar is your brother? Let him be ever so ugly or deformed, I shall be so far from being frightened as his appearance that I shall love and honor him, and consider him as my nearest relation." The fairy ordered a gold chafing dish to be set with a fire in it under the porch of her palace, with a box of the same metal. Out of the latter she took some incense, and threw it into the fire, when there arose a thick cloud of smoke. Some moments after, the fairy said to Prince Ahmed,
"Prince, there comes my brother. Do you see him?"
The prince immediately perceived Shaibar, who was but a foot and a half high, coming gravely with his heavy bar on his shoulder, his beard 30 feet long, which supported itself before him, and a pair of thick moustaches in proportion, tucked up to his ears, and almost covering his face. His eyes were very small, like a pig's, and deep sunk in his head, which was of an enormous size, and on which he wore a pointed cap. Besides all this, he had a hump behind and before. If Prince Ahmed had not known that Shaibar was Pari Banu's brother, he would not have been able to behold him without fear. But knowing who he was, he waited for him with the fairy, and received him without the least concern. Shaibar, as he came forward, looked at the prince with an eye that would have chilled his soul in his body, and asked Pari Banu, when he first accosted her, who that man was. To which she replied,
"He is my husband, brother. His name is Ahmed. He is a son of the Sultan of the Indies. The reason why I did not invite you to my wedding was I was unwilling to divert you from the expedition you were engaged in, and from which I heard with pleasure you returned victorious. On his account, I have taken the liberty now to call for you."
At these words, Shaibar, looking at Prince Ahmed with a favorable eye, which, however, diminished neither his fierceness nor savage look, said,
"Is there anything, sister, where I can serve him? He has only to speak. It is enough for me that he is your husband, to engage me to do for him whatever he desires."
"The Sultan, his father,"
replied Pari Banu,
"has a curiosity to see you, and I desire he may be your guide to the Sultan's court."
"He needs but lead the way. I will follow him,"
replied Shaibar.
"Brother,"
resumed Pari Banu,
"it is too late to go today, therefore stay till tomorrow morning. And in the meantime, as it is fit you should know all that has passed between the Sultan of the Indies and Prince Ahmed since our marriage, I will inform you this evening."
The next morning, after Shaibar had been informed of all that was proper for him to know, he set out with Prince Ahmed, who was to present him to the Sultan. When they arrived at the gates of the capital, the people, as soon as they saw Shaibar, ran and hid themselves in their shops and houses, shutting their doors, while others, taking to their heels, communicated their fear to all they met, who stayed not to look behind them, insomuch that Shaibar and the Prince Ahmed, as they went along, found all the streets and squares desolate, till they came to the palace, where the porters, instead of preventing Shaibar from entering, ran away too, so that the prince and he advanced without any obstacle to the council hall, where the Sultan was seated on his throne and giving audience. Here, likewise, the officers, at the approach of Shaibar, abandoned their posts, and gave them free admittance. Shaibar, carrying his head erect, went fiercely up to the throne, without waiting to be presented by Prince Ahmed, and accosted the Sultan of the Indies in these words.
"You have asked for me,"
said he.
"See, here I am. What would you have with me?"
The Sultan, instead of answering, clapped his hands before his eyes, and turned away his head to avoid the sight of so terrible an object. Shaibar was so provoked at this uncivil and rude reception, after he had given him the trouble to come so far, that he instantly lifted up his iron bar, saying,
"Speak, then."
Let it fall on his head, and killed him, before Prince Ahmed could intercede on his behalf. All that he could do was to prevent his killing the Grand Vizier, who sat not far from him on his right hand,
representing to him that he had always given the Sultan his father good advice.
"These are they, then,"
said Shaibar,
"who gave him bad."
and as he pronounced these words, he killed all the other viziers on the right and left, flatterers and favorites of the Sultan who were Prince Ahmed's enemies. Every time he struck, he crushed someone or other, and none escaped but those who, not rendered motionless by fear, saved themselves by flight. When this terrible execution was over, Shaibar came out of the council hall into the courtyard with the iron bar upon his shoulder, and looking at the Grand Vizier, who owed his life to Prince Ahmed, said,
"I know there is here a certain sorceress, who is a greater enemy of the prince my brother-in-law than all those base favorites I have chastised. Let her be brought to me immediately."
The Grand Vizier instantly sent for her, and as soon as she was brought, Shaibar, knocking her down with his iron bar, said,
"Take the reward of thy pernicious counsel, and learn to feign sickness again."
He left her dead on the spot. After this, he said,
"This is not yet enough. I will treat the whole city in the same manner if they do not immediately acknowledge Prince Ahmed, my brother-in-law, as Sultan of the Indies."
Then all who were present made the air ring with the repeated acclamations of, "Long life to Sultan Ahmed!" And immediately after, he was proclaimed through the whole metropolis. Shaibar caused him to be clothed in the royal vestments, installed him on the throne, and after he had made all swear homage and fidelity, returned to his sister Pari Bano, whom he brought with great pomp, and made her to be owned Sultaness of the Indies. As for Prince Ali and Princess Nouronihar, as they had no concern in the conspiracy, Prince Ahmed assigned them a considerable province with its capital, where they spent the rest of their lives. Afterwards, he sent an officer to Hossein, to acquaint him with the change, and make him an offer of any province he might choose. But that prince thought himself so happy in his solitude that he desired the officer to return to his brother thanks for the kindness he designed him, assuring him of his submission, but that the only favor he desired was to be indulged with leave to live retired in the place he had chosen for his retreat. End of section 8.